Hello and welcome back to Warhammer. I'm your host, Mark. Just the solo manifestos. Don't want to drag anyone else into this madness we're going down. Yeah, I'm kind of just unpacking 40K, been in the hobby a long time, just kind of compiling some thoughts and some trends and just sharing kind of what I've been noticing. Not all of it's good, not all of it's critical. Some of it is actually a lot of it is just observation, and honestly, it just depends on what you like. Will depend on kind of how you feel about 40K in different eras. But yeah, we're going to do another manifesto. This one's called Grimdark versus Grimdark PG-13. It's a fun term. Nothing more child-friendly than the Grimdark of 40K. It seems like that's a little twist that happens where we get this Grimdark universe, but also there are some things that we just avoid completely. Before we get into this episode, just come join the Discord, the Patreon. You can join the live streams, get ad-free, all that kind of fun stuff. Support the show. You can go and give $1 and it really helps out, keeps the show moving, keeps it flowing. Easy peasy. All right, let's dive into this manifesto. Prep my reading voice. Warhammer is a universe where planets are erased as policy, where demons tear their way into reality, where ritual sacrifice is just Tuesday, where war isn't tragedy is a default state of existence. In the far future, there is only war, and not just war, extermination, possession, mass slaughter on a scale so large it becomes background noise. But here's the strange part. Certain other adult themes, those get softened, avoided, reframed, carefully handled, sometimes quietly removed altogether. So here's a paradox. Why is extreme violence acceptable, even iconic, but other mature topics aren't? Why can you have 1 billion people die in an exterminatus, and that's grimdark, but something more intimate, more grounded suddenly becomes controversial? Now, to be clear, this isn't a complaint, and it's not a culture war bait. It's something bigger. It's about how modern intellectual property works. It's about corporate storytelling. It's about what kinds of darkness are considered safe and what kinds are considered risky. Because in 40K, darkness sells, but not all darkness is treated equally. Here's the first uncomfortable idea. Violence in fiction is culturally normalized, especially stylized violence. War becomes abstract, death becomes faceless, and casualties become numbers. When we hear 1 billion dead, it barely registers. It's a statistic, it's cosmic, it's distant. And Warhammer 40K thrives on distance. It's a violence that's operatic, mythic, ritualized, often impersonal. An Inquisitor orders an exterminatus, the planet burns, fade to black. We're not watching families, we're not sitting in a room when someone's grieving. We're watching a symbol of annihilation, and that's the key. Because when violence becomes large enough, it stops feeling intimate. Compare that to a single, grounded, uncomfortable human scenario. Something small, personal, emotionally specific. Suddenly, it hits different. Suddenly, it's not abstract. Suddenly, it's not epic. So here's the question. Is scale what makes it safe? Does turning horror into a spectacle make it easier to consume? In 40K, violence isn't just present, it's aesthetic. Skulls, chainswords, battlefield iconography. It becomes visual language, branding, atmosphere. It's transgressive, but in a way we've culturally decided is acceptable. Because it's not about people, it's about myth. And once violence becomes mythic, it stops feeling real. Now let's zoom out of the setting and look at the company. Games Workshop isn't a scrappy underground studio anymore. It's publicly traded, it operates in a global market, it's expanding aggressively into mainstream media. Video games, animations, streaming adaptations, licensing deals everywhere. That changes things. Because when you're a niche hobby brand, you can afford to be weird. When you're a global IP, you have shareholders. And shareholders hate unpredictability. Here's the corporate reality. Violence sells, it's proven. It's market tested. It's been in blockbuster films, AA games, AAA games, and fantasy art for decades. It's clear commercial lane for it. It has a clear commercial lane for it. But controversial social topics, those are unpredictable. They can trigger backlash from multiple directions at once. They can trend on social media. They can impact partnerships. They can complicate licensing agreements across different countries and cultural standards. That's where the distinction starts to matter. That's what Grimdark, and then there's headline risk. Grimdark is a branding-aligned darkness. It's skulls, war, suffering, apocalypse, but stylized and mythic. Headline risk is anything that drags the IP into real-world political or cultural fights. From a purely corporate perspective, those are not the same thing. So the tension becomes, how do you protect an IP while preserving creative edge? How do you keep darkness without inviting volatility? Because artistic freedom, thrives on risk, but corporations are built to minimize it. So let's talk about tone, because 40K hasn't always felt the way it's felt now. If you go back to the Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader, early 40K was different. It was satirical, grotesque, absurdist, and openly a political parody. The Imperium wasn't just dark, it was ridiculous. It was a caricature of authoritarian bureaucracy. It was spiky, messy, borderline archaic. It felt punk. There was a sense that the whole universe was rotting and everyone is too incompetent or too fanatical to fix it. And that was part of the joke. Now compare it to modern 40K. It's cleaner. The art is more cohesive. The factions are more cleanly defined and heroes are framed more heroically. Primarchs return like mythic demigods. Space Marines feel less like tragic propaganda tools and more like legendary champions. The tone has shifted from dystopian satire to epic myth. And that raises the question, has 40K become less nihilistic? Or has it become more commercially polished? Because there's a difference. You can still have endless war and cosmic horror, but it's framed as grand, cinematic, almost noble. That hits differently than bleak satire. So in modern 40K, still dystopian parody? Or has it become an epic fantasy in space with gothic art aesthetics layered on top? That's not necessarily worse, but it is different. When the tone changes, it usually means the audience or the ambitions have changed too. Another piece of this puzzle is simple. 40K isn't niche anymore. For decades, it was a hobby you discovered through a friend, a local game store, or by stumbling across a weird codex in the back of a shop. Now, teens are entering through video games, parents are buying starter sets, cinematic trailers are racking up millions of views, and streaming adaptations on Horizon the setting has positioned itself in a much wider audience. That changes the ecosystem. When a hobby grows, a few things tend to happen. The tone stabilizes, the edges get rounded, and the lore contradictions get streamlined. Not because creators are selling out, but because cohesion becomes valuable. If millions of people are entering the universe, you can't rely on inside jokes, deep satire, or chaotic tonal swings. You need consistency, you need onboarding. And that means sanding down the sharpest corners. The darker, stranger, more absurd elements become background texture instead of frontline and center themes. Because once something becomes mainstream, it's no longer just initiated, it's for everyone. Which raises a big question. Can something stay underground once it becomes mainstream? Can a setting build on satire, extremity, and nihilism survive global expansion without becoming more polished, more mythic, more accessible? Or is that transformation inevitable the moment the audience explodes? Here's where the distinction really matters. There's a difference between Grimdark as an aesthetic and Grimdark as a philosophy. Grimdark aesthetic is what we recognize immediately. Skulls, blood, endless war, gothic cathedrals in space, chainswords and incense and purity seals. It's visual, it's striking, it's marketable. You can put it on a box, on a trailer thumbnail, on a t-shirt. But Grimdark philosophy is something entirely different. No hope, no true heroes, no moral high ground, everyone complicit in the machine. In that version of 40K, the Imperium isn't noble, it's monstrous. Chaos isn't misunderstood, it's corrosive. Xenos aren't quirky rivals, they're existential threats. Nobody wins, nobody is clean. The tragedy is the point. So the question becomes, has 40K shifted from philosophy to aesthetic? Do we still sit with the idea that the universe is fundamentally broken? Or do we mostly celebrate how cool it looks while it burns? Because in Grimdark becomes primarily branding, skulls, and slogans. Then the edges change. It's dark, it's still violent, but it might not be nihilistic in the same way. And those tensions between how it looks and what it means might be the real evolution of the setting. So where does this leave us? Is extreme violence simply easier to market than complex human themes? When destruction happens on planetary scales, does it become easier to package, easier to aestheticize, easier to sell? Does scale sanitize brutality? A billion dead feels abstract. One uncomfortable, grounded human situation feels real. And maybe real is what makes corporations nervous. Should 40K push boundaries more? Should it lean harder into the philosophical discomfort, the satire, the nihilism, the ugliness beneath the iconography? Or is restraint actually smart? Is protecting the IP what allows it to survive long term, to grow, expand, reach new audiences? And maybe the biggest question, does the setting inevitably lose edge as it gains popularity? Can something stay transgressive once it becomes globally successful? Because 40K still calls itself Grimdark, but Grimdark means something different than when it was on a starter set in the mall, than when it was strange, spiky British sci-fi satire from the late 1980s. Maybe that evolution is inevitable. Maybe it's strategic, maybe it's both. All I know is in the grim darkness of the far future, there's only war. But in the real world, there are stakeholders. So, Grimdark versus PG-13, we celebrate the violence, as I was talking about. It's all about the war and crushing your foes. And it's kind of even okay to take their skull, There are topics, though, that you just cannot have at all in a setting that you're also trying to market to children. And once again, I'm not saying that we need this controversial thing. Like, the easiest one that comes to mind is like, I don't want to be reading a Black library book and then come across a horrific rape scene. Nobody wants that. That's not what we're asking for when we say grim dark. People often also mistake grim dark for like how bad it is, how like torturous, monstrous, like how evil it is. But it's more than that. I really like the summarizing it into the philosophy aspect, where you got aesthetics, where that's more the aesthetics of grim dark, all that kind of stuff. But then when you look at the philosophy, there's no hope. You read the book, that character is going to die at the end or be in a worse situation than he started. It's nihilistic. The universe is burning around you, and I like that there's no one competent enough to save it. No one's coming for you. Even in 40K nowadays, we got Reboot Gilliman. There's whispers that he might come save your planet. Like, sure, he might not, whatever. We can retake the 500 worlds. What are we talking about? You ain't retaking shit in old 40K. You're losing planet by planet, and maybe eventually, hopefully, you're just fine. Yeah, maybe you won't die. So Grimdark, like, yes, there's the aesthetic. There's the edge where, the rape I would kind of categorize as the edge. There are edgy things where it's like, I'm going to put this in the book just to be edgy. I've done Warhammer. If you listen to the catalog, I say a lot of edgy things. Sometimes it's to be funny. Sometimes it's to be a dick, whatever. I'm just saying shit, But yeah, with 40K, it just, I lost my train of thought there, to be honest. Whatever. Yeah, the grim dark aesthetic. What other little things that I want to mention in here? Yeah, the changing from being clean, like the bigger the setting gets, the more people again, you have to sanitize it a little bit. That one I kind of disagree with. I get the philosophy behind it, the mindset behind it. Like, okay, we're gonna make money, we got to make more money, let's advertise to more people. Or like, okay, so now the people that were playing this 20 years ago are now adults and they want to play with their children. Like, even I did a Dad Hammer series, for my children eventually, hopefully. I got one now, but so they're marketing to younger people. But yeah, it just is hard to do that. It's just hard to do that in Grimdark 40K. Like, it's hard to want to talk to a child about like demonic possession. You just can't quite get there. That one's not as bad as like a rape or anything, but like you're reading fucking torture scene or something. I remember one of the first book or first little short stories I read was a Kroot ambushing Eldar and ripping open the Eldar's heart and eating, or chest, and eating his heart while it was still beating, and the Eldar was looking up on him. And I was just like a 12-year-old boy. I grew up in church, just like, holy fuck, this is crazy. If my parents thought Pokemon are bad, they're not gonna like this. And I read that story. I do remember reading that story and be like, holy fuck, that, like, I didn't know what I was getting into. I picked it up. I seen some pictures of model and I picked up the codex and I read that. Holy fuck, that was crazy. And it took me a while to read it again. Like I read a bunch of the other stuff in there, like all the Wikipedia style entries or whatever, all the kind of codex look. But it took me a while to go back because I was just too young for that aspect of it. I was definitely, I could handle war. You can handle violence. Like, yeah, if you're dealing with a million people, you don't have to think about their faces or whatever. But yeah, that was just a little too much for a young Marquino. What do you do? I don't want I don't want the universe to be sanitized, and I do understand you want to appeal to these younger audiences and stuff, but I just think like 40K became beloved and popular because of what it is. So if you start stripping away all these elements of what it was, then what are we doing? That it's not the same thing, and that you're going to maintain that popularity even amongst new people because you don't have that same like force behind you. Like I look at a lot of the new stuff that 40K does or Games Workshop does nowadays, and it's rubbish, man. I can see that they're marketing to the lowest common denominator. I can just see that it's not passionate. They're like, yeah, of course there are people who work for that company that love 40K, obviously, but like it's soulless now. It doesn't have the same fucking feel. If you compare the artwork of John Blanche and whoever's doing artwork now, this sleek, clean, colored, crisp, like it's a different vibe. But hey, to each their own. You know what? No, not on this one. I don't think there is a to each your own. I think there should be some things that are explicitly for adults. And I think that's okay. I think there should be some things that are explicitly for men or explicitly for women or whatever. I think that is okay. And I'm not saying like, don't come hang out. I'm the most inclusive guy when it comes to 40K. I invite people into my home all the time. But like, yeah, you come to my home and you're playing fucking Star Wars X-Wing. Get the fuck out. We're not doing that here. Like, I don't know. There are time and place for everything. And 40K, if you remove that Grimdark, that nihilist philosophy, those undertones of like, we're adults here. We've realized this is satirical to some degree. We don't. No, when I am drawing Aquilas, I'm not actually thinking of anything related to Nazis, believe it or not. No, it's a different symbol. It's satirical, maybe you could give it that, but like we're adults. We can look past that. And I think you can't do that if you're a child. You don't have the experience to understand the world or people or just whatever. And yeah, Grimdark PG-13, it should not be a thing. Bring back Grimdark. Or here's my other kind of solution to this, because we can't go back, but we can go forward. You come out with 3 distinct settings that kind of appeals to 3 distinct markets. You got your veteran gamers like me. You call it 40K. These are for your 20-year-old vets who are like, I didn't want the Primarchs to come back. And it ends at the 13th Black Crusade. It's your standard 40K before 8th edition came out. Then you got 30K. This is for like your historical minis fans, people who play bolt action or games like that. People who want to like look at that heraldic crest and be like, okay, what exactly do those 3 stars mean? Okay, it's tied to this. Make sure, no, they wear black belts, not brown belts. Like it's for those historically like accurate kind of people. And then we have the new setting that I would come out with called 45K. And this is kind of more like the setting that 40K is now, where it's this almost hopeful setting where Primarchs are returning. Things could be shifting. Things are happening. There's that little bit cleaner. It's like, it's just a little more friendly. So you jump the storyline 1,000, 5,000 years into the future. And now you got a whole new setting where you can get wild with it. Bring all the Primarchs back in there, but let me have my 40K. And like, not just like, well, I can play in 35K or 34K. You can play in any setting you want, technically. Like the lore doesn't actually attach to the game that way. But no, it should have its own, like, we have 3 separate rule systems with 3 separate, like, entry points. Like 45K is made for beginners. It's very rules light. Then you got 40K where it's a medium balance, like lots of rules, but not so many that you're going to choke on them. And then the historical gamers, I'm pretty sure they like rules heavy stuff. So you give it to them and you say, you guys are veterans, enjoy your fucking rules and your books and your, your symbols and whatnot. You know, it's 40K is GW says 40K is for everyone, but fuck that. It's not for everyone, man. Like, I could try to sell 40K to my mom all day long. She doesn't give a shit. She never will. So let's just not try to appeal to her. Let's not try to appeal to people that will never give a shit. And let's just stick with what's working. And that was the Grimdark. Well, there's my little rant for you today. If you're watching the live stream, I am doing another one right next after this, another manifesto. So we'll see you there. Don't forget to support the Patreon, really helps out. And yeah, I got a couple more of these written up, and we'll see where this all leads us. See where it takes us. You guys have a good one.